We welcome in Akash Anavarathan, Niners Nation. First time this season. Akash, what's happening, baby?
What's happening, guys? Football season is back.
Yes, sir. And now me just being nervous for about a month and a half is back as well. Because I don't want anybody I almost don't even want these guys to practice in training camp. The one thing I don't want is anybody getting hurt. Like, this sounds crazy, but I will be able to wrap my head around somebody, and I'm not even going to say no names because I don't want to put it out there, but somebody getting hurt week 1 for the season as opposed to the last day of training camp. Like, that would just ruin everything.
It's the worst part of training camp. You just fear that there aren't any of those injuries, especially the non-contact ones where you see the tweets about, a player going down against air. Those are just the worst part. So hopefully everyone across the league, not just the 49ers, are able to stay healthy heading into the regular season.
Yeah, no doubt. Akash, any significant ramifications to the Dee Ford release by the San Francisco 49ers a few moments ago?
No significant ramifications. Expected it to be mostly procedural. It saves the 49ers about $1 million in cap space. But I think it was expected for a while here that Dee Ford wasn't going to be on this team. And hopefully that just opens up a roster spot for someone else to take. I know they signed Robert Nkemdiche, the former first-round pick. And so just get, more competition at the defensive line now that Ford's off the team.
So with Ford and potentially Jimmy Garoppolo, and him potentially being cut with the contracts, is that something that the 49ers just kind of tuck away for the future, whether it's $1 million here, $1 million there, whatever the case may be? Or do you think that possibly goes to something that they want to do with Deebo Samuel?
I think they're both connected. Obviously, if they were to release Jimmy Garoppolo here before week 1, they would save about $24 million against the salary cap, and combine that with what they just saved with the Dee Ford release. That totals about $25 million in savings. And so, they probably earmarked some of that for a Deebo Samuel extension. And then outside of that, there's the potential for a mid-season trade, like they did with Emmanuel Sanders a couple seasons ago, something like what the Rams did with Von Miller last season. So you don't know who becomes available. And if you have the cap space, then, you can certainly make a trade like that for a veteran. So I think they've left themselves some options now that they've got this extra cap room, and if they don't use it, it'll roll over into next season, and they can use that in free agency to build out this roster, and they can use it for an Bosa extension, which they'll look to do next season. So I think they've given themselves some options now that they will clear this cap space.
Akash, how close is, or maybe how far is that Deebo Samuel extension? How near is that?
I think we're close, given the fact that the way Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have spoken about the negotiations the last few days. Kyle Shanahan said that the 49ers front office, Lynch and Parag Maratha, have been talking to Tory Dandy, Deebo Samuel's agent, just nonstop. And so pads come on Monday at training camp. So that's really when you get contact and tackling and all that stuff. And so I feel like that's a soft deadline for when a Deebo Samuel extension could be in place. Mm-hmm. And he was there. He showed up today to training camp, even though he was just working on the side field on some conditioning. So I expect the negotiations to really ramp up here over the next few days. Hopefully something gets done. It looks like that's the way it's trending, and I think we're just on the cusp of a new deal.
We're months removed from that whole fiasco, and I still don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't think there was ever a moment where, and this is just me, hypothesizing here, but there was never a moment where it felt like the 49ers weren't going to pay Deebo, and so it wasn't a matter of him not getting his money or anything like that, or being paid, his worth. Just out of nowhere, Deebo was like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, can you make any sense of what that was all about, in your opinion?
I get it if you're Deebo Samuel or Deebo Samuel's agent. I mean, after the season that he had last year, especially down the stretch, at the end of the season in the playoffs, you felt like you really put the offense on your shoulders, especially with the injuries to Jimmy Garoppolo. And just what he did both as a running back and a wide receiver literally left it all out there. And I'm sure when he came into the offseason, he was hoping to get paid what he thought he was worth. And, the 49ers just don't do business that way. Their opening offers are usually on the lower side. And I remember a couple years ago, George Kittle's agent called the first offer the Valentine's Day Massacre when they were negotiating Kittle's extension a couple years ago. So I'm sure, Deebo Samuel probably felt offended or was hurt based off of the first offer. And I'm sure that in combination with some other things, whether it was his usage or location or whatever, probably caused that trade request. But since then, I guess, we're now 4 or 5 months removed from that. And it looks like he's clearly happy to be here, happy to be with the 49ers. Now it's just a matter of getting the contract worked out and him, signed to a long-term deal that he feels happy with. And, he can continue to go out on the field and perform the way he did last season.
Gosh, it feels like the 49ers fans are kind of comfortable with the Deebo Samuel situation. Kyle Shanahan was pretty emphatic. This is Trey Lance's team yesterday. So with those two situations seemingly addressed, what is the biggest uncertainty as training camp gets underway here?
I think the biggest concern or question mark, you'd say, is the interior of that offensive line. And if there's one thing that's going to hold this team back this season, and I think it's an extremely talented roster, it's going to be, the center and the right guard position. And I think they're going to shuffle through a lot of different combinations during training camp to find what works. I think Kyle Shanahan mentioned that Dan Brunskill is going to take some first-team reps at center. I know they've got a bunch of young guys that they like there. Spencer Burford, who took all the first-team reps at right guard today. Jake Brendel's been a candidate for the center spot. They signed a couple of undrafted free agents in Donovan West and Poe out of Mercer as well, Jason Poe. And so they've got some competition at the spot. They got a lot of young competition. And so I think if they can solidify those two spots, you'd feel a little bit more comfortable, especially with, effectively a rookie starter at quarterback. So I think that's probably the biggest question mark heading into camp.
Hey, Akash, check this out. So we had a conversation earlier in the show, and we were talking about like where Trey Lance would have to rank on the list of best players on the 49ers for this team to be successful. And one of our listeners, they had him like right now like 10th, right? And I don't think he's 10th. I think he's probably somewhere around 7, maybe 6. But I said by the end of the season, I think he needs to be top 5. Like it'll be like Trent, Bosa, Deebo, maybe one other guy, and then Trey Lance. Do you think that's accurate? Or do you think that he needs to be even higher than that for this team to reach the heights they want to reach?
That's a really interesting question. I was thinking about Kyle Shanahan said the other day, which was comparing this season to the 2019 season, where really in that first 8 games, they were 8-0, but Jimmy Garoppolo really struggled in the passing game early in that season, and they won a lot of games on the backs of that defense and the running game. I mean, I think they had 5 turnovers early in that season against Pittsburgh. They won early in Tampa Bay on the 2 pick sixes from James Winston. And so they found different ways to win until Jimmy Garoppolo got more comfortable as the season went along. And, he had some better games in the back half of that season. And I think you can see something similar with Trey Lance and this team this year. I think the defense is equally as talented on paper. And now they've got some young running backs in there as well. And so if they can just figure out, how to stay afloat in the first half of the season with Trey Lance and just let him get comfortable and familiar in this offense and familiar just playing professional games, then hopefully he can, start to take over some games in the second half of the year. So, it's hard to compare different players on the roster who play different positions because the quarterback has such a big impact. But I have a hard time, him seeing crack the top 5 because, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle are just on a completely different tier than the other players on this roster. I think you can put Jimmy Ward kind of in that tier 1B right behind them. And so I'd say Trey Lance, if by the end of the season he's just on the cusp of that, I'd say that's a pretty successful season. But I have a hard time seeing him crack, the impact that those guys have at their respective positions.
Akash, great stuff, man. Looking forward to talking to you a lot more now that the season is finally here. We appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.
Talk to you